The training ground was already awake long before the sun fully rose. A pale orange light stretched across the horizon, touching the rows of armored vehicles, steel barriers, and neatly aligned rifles resting on their stands. The air smelled of dust and cold metal, familiar, grounding. For most soldiers here, mornings like this blended together. For her, they never did. She stood perfectly still near the firing line, boots planted firmly in the gravel, posture calm but alert. The .50 caliber M82 rifle rested beside her, massive and unmistakable, its dark surface catching the early light. It was a weapon that demanded respect, long, heavy, precise. Many struggled even to lift it properly. She didn't. To her, it wasn't a symbol of power. It was a responsibility. Around her, quiet murmurs floated between small groups of personnel. Some adjusted their gear, others whispered jokes to ease the tension. A few glances came her way, quick looks, curious looks, doubtful ones. She had learned to recognize them all. Most people didn't say anything out loud. They didn't need to. The questions were always the same. Is she really assigned to that rifle? Does she even belong here? She kept her eyes forward, focused on the range ahead. Years of discipline had taught her that attention was a choice. She chose not to give it to distractions. Then the mood shifted. The sound of approaching footsteps, measured, confident, cut through the low noise like a command without words. Conversations faded. Spines straightened. A senior officer announced the arrival in a clear, formal tone. The general was walking the line. He moved with the ease of someone used to being obeyed, his uniform immaculate, his expression unreadable. Officers flanked him as he inspected the unit, stopping briefly here and there, offering short remarks or nods of approval. His presence carried weight. Everyone felt it. She noticed him approaching from the corner of her vision but didn't turn her head. Protocol mattered. Focus mattered more. The general stopped near her position, just for a moment. His eyes flicked to the rifle first, lingering slightly longer than usual. The M82 always drew attention. Then his gaze shifted to her. There was no open disrespect in his face. No anger. Just something colder. Assumption. Without a word, he looked away and continued walking. It was subtle, almost nothing, but she felt it anyway. A few nearby soldiers exchanged glances. One of them raised an eyebrow. Another smirked, just barely, before looking back down. No one said anything, but the message hung in the air like a challenge. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Control. That was the first lesson she'd ever learned. Control over breath, over movement, over emotion. She had been underestimated before, many times. In training, in evaluations, even on her first assignment, when someone had laughed and asked if she'd been lost. She didn't correct people anymore. Experience had taught her that explanations were wasted on those who had already decided who you were. Instead, she rested her hand lightly on the rifle stock. The metal was cool under her glove, familiar as her own heartbeat. This weapon wasn't issued to just anyone. Neither was her position. Every step that brought her here had been earned the hard way, through endurance, precision, and silence. Behind her calm expression, memories flickered. Endless hours on the range. The ache in her shoulders during early days. The instructor who had doubted her until the target spoke for her. The long nights studying wind patterns, angles, distance. She remembered the first time she'd qualified at a level that made the room go quiet. Respect, she had learned, often arrived late. The general continued down the line, already speaking to another officer. To him, the moment had passed. To her, it was just beginning. She adjusted her stance by a fraction of an inch, grounding herself. Today wasn't about proving anything. Not yet. Today was about readiness. About being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she had trained to do. Whatever assumptions had been made would correct themselves in time. They always did. And somewhere down the line, sooner than anyone expected, the general would stop walking. The range commander's voice cut through the air, sharp and formal, calling the unit to attention. The general had stopped farther down the line, now speaking quietly with two senior officers. Clipboards were opened, tablets lit up. A live fire evaluation was being added, unplanned, immediate. That was unusual. Whispers rippled through the formation. Live fire drills were routine, but spontaneous ones, especially with high command present, were not. It meant scrutiny. It meant pressure. It meant that every mistake would be remembered. She didn't react. Her expression remained neutral as she stepped forward when her name was called. No hesitation. No glance to the side. The gravel crunched softly beneath her boots as she moved to her firing position. Shooter will engage long-range steel. Distance: 1,000 meters, the range commander announced. Wind variable. Time limit applies. 1,000 meters. That distance alone caused a few heads to lift. Someone behind her inhaled sharply. The general turned at the mention of the range, his attention drawn back like gravity. He folded his arms, watching now, not casually, but with interest. Assistants hurried to set the target system. Far in the distance, barely visible through heat shimmer and morning haze, a steel plate was raised. At this range, it would appear no larger than a coin. She knelt, then smoothly transitioned to prone, movements precise and economical. The M82 came forward with her, heavy but obedient. She settled in behind it as if the ground itself had shaped around her body. Bipod locked, rear support adjusted, everything aligned. Her spotter moved into position beside her, low and quiet. He didn't speak yet. He didn't need to. They had worked together long enough to trust silence. She brought her eye to the scope. The world narrowed. Noise faded. The murmurs, the footsteps, the general's presence, all of it dissolved into distance and data. Wind drift tugged at the image, subtle but readable. She adjusted for elevation with practiced turns, counting clicks without thinking. Her breathing slowed, each inhale measured, each exhale deliberate. The spotter leaned closer, winds shifting left to right. Light but inconsistent. She nodded once. She already knew. The general watched her now without blinking. He expected tension, maybe even nerves. What he saw instead was stillness. Not stiffness, control. The kind that couldn't be taught quickly. Shooter ready? The range commander asked. She waited for the exact moment when the wind softened, not stopped, but steadied. A window. Brief. Enough. Ready, she said. The command came. Fire when ready. Her finger took up the slack. The rifle thundered. The recoil rolled through her shoulder and into the ground, powerful but controlled. Dust kicked up around the muzzle brake. The sound echoed off the distant hills, heavy and final. A fraction of a second passed. Then, clang. The steel plate rang out, sharp and unmistakable, the sound traveling back across the range like an answer. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then quiet murmurs burst into surprised noise. A few soldiers straightened instinctively. Someone whispered, "First round." The range commander checked his display, eyebrows lifting despite himself. Impact confirmed. Center mass. Her spotter exhaled, a hint of a smile breaking through his professionalism. Solid hit. She stayed down, steady, waiting for follow-up instructions. There was no celebration in her posture, no shift in expression. One hit didn't end a test. She knew that better than anyone. The general stepped forward now, boots crunching against gravel as he approached her position. His shadow fell across the rifle. Again, he said calmly. Not a request. A test within a test. The range commander hesitated only a moment before relaying the command. She adjusted for the slight wind change, recalculating almost instantly. The second shot came faster than the first, but not rushed. Another thunderous report. Another ringing impact. This time, the sound was louder, cleaner. The general stopped walking. He looked from the distant target back to her, then down at the rifle, as if seeing both for the first time. His expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Assumption gave way to assessment. He nodded once, slowly. Who trained her? He asked. The range commander answered, pride creeping into his voice. She qualified top of her class, sir. Consistent at extreme range. The general said nothing at first. He simply watched as she cleared the rifle and waited for the next command, calm as stone. For the first time that morning, he didn't walk past her. He stood there, and everyone noticed. The range had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now, not the casual stillness of routine training, but the focused hush that follows surprise. The kind where everyone senses that something has shifted, even if no one says it out loud. She remained prone, waiting. Discipline didn't end with a perfect shot, it ended with procedure. Only when the range commander gave the signal did she rise smoothly, clear the weapon, and step back from the firing line. The M82 rested on its bipod, inert now, but still commanding attention. The general approached fully this time. Up close, his presence felt heavier, not threatening, but undeniable. Years of authority carried in posture alone. He stopped directly in front of her, eyes sharp, measuring. Not just her shooting, but her composure, her stillness, the way she met his gaze without challenge or fear. "You handled that rifle like it was part of you," he said at last. "Yes, sir," she replied. 2 words. Neutral tone. No pride. No apology. He studied her name tape, then glanced at the small rectangular pin fixed above her chest pocket. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. It wasn't flashy. No medals, no dramatic markings, just a subdued insignia worn by those cleared for a very specific role. The sniper unit pin. The general's hand lifted slightly, as if he were about to gesture, and then stopped. Around them, conversations had died completely. Even the range commander had gone still, sensing the moment. A few soldiers leaned forward without realizing it. They knew what that pin meant. They also knew how rarely it was acknowledged openly. The general's expression hardened, not with anger, but with understanding. "So that's why," he said quietly. She didn't respond. She wasn't supposed to explain herself. The pin spoke for her. He turned to the officers behind him. "Why wasn't I informed she was attached to the sniper unit?" One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, her assignment is specialized. Need to know only." The general nodded once. "I see." He looked back at her, this time with a different weight in his eyes. Earlier, there had been doubt, curiosity, perhaps even dismissal. Now there was calculation, respect forming not from sentiment, but from evidence. "You know," he said, voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear, "I've seen experienced marksmen miss at half that distance under less pressure." She held his gaze, steady. "Yes, sir." A corner of his mouth tightened, not quite a smile, but close. "You didn't." He reached out then, not to touch the rifle, but to indicate the pin. "That insignia doesn't come easy." "No, sir." "Who was your evaluator?" She named him. The general nodded again, filing it away. For a moment, it seemed like the exchange was over. The general stepped back, signaling the range commander to continue. Movement began to return. Breaths were released. The tension loosened just slightly. Then the general paused. "Wait." Everyone froze again. He turned back to her one final time. "You stopped me earlier, when I reached for the rifle." "Yes, sir." Most people would have hesitated. Or apologized. She answered without hesitation. "The weapon was hot, sir. Protocol required immediate correction." A long pause followed. Then the general let out a short breath, a quiet laugh, more acknowledgement than amusement. "Protocol over rank," he said. "That takes confidence." "Training, sir," she replied. He studied her once more, then gave a small, deliberate nod. Not to the range, not to the officers, to her. "Carry on," he said. As he turned away, the meaning of that nod rippled through the line. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. Recognition from the highest level, earned, not given. When the training resumed, the atmosphere had changed. No one whispered now, no one smirked. The earlier taunts were gone, replaced by something quieter and more powerful. Respect. She returned to formation, posture unchanged, expression calm. But those around her saw her differently now. Not as an exception, not as a curiosity, as a standard. Far down the range, the steel target swayed gently in the distance, still vibrating from the impacts. The sound had faded, but the message hadn't. The general had walked past her rifle once. He didn't make that mistake again.